Okay, now we got a picture. Okay, so today is Jeremiah and Isaiah criticizing and energizing. Okay, how Lutherans interpret the Bible. All right, first I got to talk about. Let me put this here, since I'm back at the podium. All right, first, what do I mean by Lutherans? I'm sorry, we're going to go past noon now, since I got started 15 minutes late. I apologize. What do I mean by Lutherans? It's a shorthand for typical members of an ELCA congregation. ELCA, of course, means Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, right? There are other Lutheran denominations. ELCA is arguably the most progressive of the Lutheran denominations. Now, every ELCA congregation has a wide spectrum of membership, right? We welcome everyone. That means we have some conservative members and we have some progressive members. So what's typical? Well, I don't know, but I'm taking a guess here. And of course, the ELCA is only one of the Lutheran denominations. If you go to an LCMS congregation, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, you'll get some quite different answers than I'm giving here. I just have to say that. All right, what I really want to talk about here is, are Bible stories literally true? Another way to say that, historically accurate, or is what the Bible, what is written down in the Bible, did it happen exactly that way? That's another way to say it, all right? Any guesses as to the answer to that question? As if you ask most people around here that question, what would they say? Or what should they say? And the answer is, we don't care. All right? Because it's the wrong question. Lutherans are more interested in understanding the Bible than in defending it. Trying to defend the Bible is a waste of time. We believe God speaks to us through the Bible. So what is the right question? The right question is, what is God saying to us in the Bible? God can speak through a lot of different kinds of literature, and the Bible contains a lot of different kinds of literature. It contains poetry. It does contain some history. It contains proverbs. It contains gospel. It contains some letters that people have written to one another. It contains parables. Jesus told parables. They are stories he made up to make some very good points. They're not historical stories. He made them up to make some very good points. They're powerful stories, but they didn't happen that way. We don't care about that. Nobody seems to care about that. But God speaks to us through those stories. So when we're reading the Bible, and we do encourage people to read the Bible, the question we should be asking is, what's God trying to tell me here? Okay? So I just wanted to bring that up. That's the way we look at the Bible here at St. Andrew. Another thing, Bill Beavers asked last time, what's the timeline here? What happened when? I thought that was a very good question, and if you attended the classes I taught using the material from Crossways International, that was 15 or 20 years ago, but Bill and Sandy attended those classes, and they remember that what Crossways called the telltale timeline is what they called it. It was an extremely busy looking document, but they felt it quite useful, and I think I'm going to take that question to heart and show the timeline of what happened when from now on in this class. So I took that timeline, scanned it, and clipped out a section. This is a clip from that timeline. So don't worry, it looks so busy. That's my only criticism of that timeline, is that it's too busy. It packs too much information in one picture. But if you look at it, the black circles with numbers are dates, BCE. That stands for before the Common Era. We don't use the terms before Christ and AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. We don't use those anymore. We use the terms BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, Common Era now. So those dates are BCE, before the Common Era. So those are dates, and then along the bottom is a colorful timeline of what was happening in Israel at those dates. Let me go up and give a closer view of what was happening. Just to show this, black and yellow cross-hatching was their time in Egypt. This red block here with the tablet in it, that's their 40-year wandering in the wilderness, including the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. That's what the tablet symbolizes. And then this break here at the beginning of this multicolor period, that was their entry into the promised land that the book of Joshua describes, when they slaughtered the Canaanites to take control of the land. The multicolored band is the time of the judges, when individual judges rose up as commanded by God to take care of specific problems that they were having, specifically with their neighboring nations. The numbers refer to specific judges. The first judge was Joshua. The last judge, number 14, was Samuel. Last judge was Samuel. The people demanded that Samuel anoint a king for them. They got tired of these judges and not having a king and not having a standing army. They wanted to be like all the other nations around them. They wanted a king to rule over them. And we'll talk about that a lot today. It got them into big trouble. So eventually God told Samuel, all right, I don't like it, but go ahead and anoint a king. And Samuel anointed Saul as the first king, king number one here, King Saul, the first king of the united kingdom of Israel. Saul followed by king number 2, King David, followed by king number 3, King Solomon. King Solomon ended up to be such a bad king that after Solomon's reign ended and Solomon's son Rehoboam took over as king, the kingdom split into two. The kingdom of Judah in the south and the kingdom of Israel in the north. That's that blue, red and blue bar at the top. Two separate kingdoms. They never would be reunited again. And eventually the northern kingdom of Israel was overrun by the Assyrian Empire. And we'll get to that later today. But that's the timeline. David's reign began roughly in 1000 BCE. Okay, so that's the timeline we're looking at. Any questions about that? Now we're going to look into how Israel, after having freed themselves from the oppression of the Pharaoh in Egypt and establishing an alternative community led by Moses, how they got themselves into so much trouble once again. In 250 years, they got themselves into trouble. I got to tell you a personal story. This happened in about 1976. Pat and I were visiting my parents in Denison, Iowa. My parents had a house with a rec room in the basement, and Dad and I were sitting downstairs having drinks and snacks before dinner, and Pat was upstairs with Mom helping put dinner together, and Dad and I were discussing the political situation in the country. My dad said something like, sometimes I think what this country needs is a good dictator. Well, I didn't say that I thought good dictator was an oxymoron. Those two words don't go together. But what I said was, this was 1976, was on the Democratic side, there were contenders like Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy, and I knew what Dad's politics were, so I said, well, Dad, what if Ted Kennedy decided to make himself dictator? He grinned, and I knew he caught my point, You be careful what you wish for. So that brings us to the state of Israel during when Samuel was the judge of Israel, and the people were demanding a king. They thought that would be the greatest thing if they had a king. Now this passage is really long, so I'll try to cut it short. You probably won't be able to read this, but I think this is an important indication of how they got themselves into big trouble again. So I am going to read this. So Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king. He said, "These will be the ways of a king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots, and he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. And he will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courtiers. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and courtiers. And he will take your male and female slaves and the best of your cattle and donkeys and put them to his work. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And on that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you on that day." But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, we are determined to have a king over us, so that we also may be like the other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles." When Samuel heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, I can almost hear the Lord sigh here. "Listen to their voice and set a king over them." 1 Samuel 8, verses 10 through 22. The start of their trouble once again. So, Samuel anointed Saul, followed by Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul didn't work out well. So Samuel then anointed David to be the next king from the tribe of Judah. Saul's son Solomon was the next king. David worked out pretty well. Israel grew to the largest size it had ever been, and in land area, and the largest it would ever be since David. Under Solomon, it started to shrink again. The Edomites to the south rebelled and split off, and Solomon sold off parts to the northwest to finance his building projects, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. King Solomon, some of the steps he took that weren't so good. A harem. He was concerned, like all kings are, about succession, royal succession. You know, in England, King Henry VIII had trouble producing a male heir. He blamed his wives, and he, married 8 wives trying to get a male heir. He finally succeeded with Edward, but he kept having daughters before that. Well, you'd have much better luck coming up with a male heir if you had more than one chance every 9 months. Therefore, a harem, right? King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh. A daughter of Pharaoh was his favorite wife. But there were many more. Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the Israelites, "You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for they will surely incline your heart to follow their gods." Solomon clung to these in love. Among his wives were 700 princesses and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. 1 Kings 11, 1-3. So that happened as the Lord had warned. Solomon listened to his wives and started turning away from God. A system of tax districts to replace the traditional tribes and clans of the nation. I won't read all of this. Solomon had 12 officials over all Israel who provided food for the king and his household. That was their instruction. They didn't deal much in money back then. They dealt with real food products. Each one had to make provision for 1 month in the year. Now, I'm not going to read all of these names, but there were 12 of them, except for one. The first one, his name was Ben-Hur. That's a familiar name, right? There were other names that begin with Ben. So I got to explain what that is. In Hebrew, the word Ben means son of. So in the West, in Western European names, we have names that end with son, like Johnson and Christiansen, and right. So that means son of, right? So Johnson means son of John, right? Well, in Hebrew, Ben means son of. Ben-Hur is son of Hur. So you see all these Hebrew names that begin with Ben? Well, that's son of. Ben-Hur, it's a usual Hebrew name. That's the name of a famous movie, but it was based very loosely on a novel that was published in the 1880s by Lew Wallace was the author's name. Quite an interesting man, but in the interest of time, I won't go into that. He was not only an author, he was an artist, quite an accomplished artist, a lawyer. He served for a term as governor of New Mexico, a soldier. In the Civil War, he rose to the rank of Major General. Anyway, I won't say anymore. But there are other names in here that begin with Ben, but that's what it means. In Arabic, the similar word is bin, B-I-N, as in bin Laden. That means son of Laden. So Arabic has the same thing. Okay. Won't spend any more time on that. King Solomon established an elaborate bureaucracy. King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were his high officials. Again, I won't read that. But in 1 Kings 9, we learn that the chief officers numbered 550 who had charge of the people who carried on the work. King Solomon had a standing army, just as Samuel had predicted, to the detriment of the people. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was in command of the army. But of the Israelites, Solomon made no slaves. They were the soldiers. They were his officials, his commanders, his captains, and the commanders of his chariotry and cavalry. King Solomon used a fascination with wisdom to amass wealth. Even the Queen of Sheba, that's in Africa, came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. So the leaders of the world came to Solomon bringing all kinds of wealth. The end of this passage says, every one of them brought a present, objects of silver and gold, garments, weaponry, spices, horses and mules, so much year by year. So the wealth of the world poured into Solomon. He used this wisdom to accumulate massive amounts of wealth. He used conscripted labor for massive building projects. Forced labor out of all of Israel. The levy numbered 30,000 men. Besides Solomon's 3,300 supervisors who were over the work, having charge of the people who did the work, at the king's command, they quarried out great costly stones in order to lay the foundation of the house. This is the temple with dressed stones. So Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders and the Gebalites did the stone cutting and prepared the timber and the stone to build the house. 3 points that Walter Brueggemann makes in his book about the downfall of the House of Solomon. First is the affluence of the ruling class, what we would call the 1% here in this country. Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea. They ate and drank and were happy. Solomon was sovereign over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, even to the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of choice flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 fat oxen and 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl. 1 Kings 4:20 through 23. This was the royal feast daily. Clearly, there's a new reality in Israel at this point. The counterculture of Moses lived in a world of scarcity. Remember the manna and quail that the Israelites ate in the wilderness. All it takes to counter that consciousness is satiation. They were full all the time. The royalty. It is likely that the affluence is not equitably shared. Well, really? Like I said, it's equivalent to the 1% here in this country. That passage I just read was the menu of the royal entourage. We've got to wonder if eating that well means that food is being taken from the table of others. Covenanting had been replaced by consuming. In a consuming society, an alternative consciousness is surely difficult to sustain. Second point, leading to the downfall of Solomon, is an oppressive social policy. If you think I might be commenting on today's society as well, yes, you're right. This oppressive social policy was the foundation of the regime. It made Solomon's achievements possible. It was the source of the affluence and inequity just mentioned. The fundamental part of this policy was the practice of forced labor. Now, this type of exploitation can develop insatiable momentum. Another quote, now whereas this was Solomon's son Rehoboam. After Solomon died, his son Rehoboam rose to the throne. Now whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. The people were hoping that Rehoboam would go a little bit easier on them. He didn't. The politics of justice and compassion has completely disappeared at this point. A complete separation between the ruling class and the people. Third point, static religion. The religion had become static rather than dynamic. It became a theological sanction for affluence and oppression. God is fully subordinated to the purpose of the king at this point, and is fully accessible to the king who is God's patron. Another quote, then Solomon said, the Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell forever. So the king has captured God in a temple. God is now on call, mediated by the king's priests. The priests of the temple work for the king. So, God's word is interpreted by the priests, who, of course, always affirm the king's word. God is now always on the king's side. And as far as anyone approaching God, that requires the priest's approval, who always listen to the king because they work for the king. So we have the three legs of the stool of the royal consciousness, the conventional society, the economics of affluence, the politics of oppression, supported by the religion of immanence. Immanence means the here and now. We have a God that is captured in the temple and essentially serves the purposes of the king. And the people are numb to it. Any questions about the state of Israel at this point? Yeah, it's interesting. Solomon has a reputation for being wise, doesn't he? Well, the people, there were a lot of people who must have thought of him as wise at that point, because at that time, because the kings and queens of the world showed up with gifts to listen to his wisdom. There are certainly folk tales about Solomon's wisdom. There's a story about him telling a couple of women in a dispute over a baby to cut the baby in half, right? And one woman said, "Oh no, don't do that. The other woman can have the baby." And Solomon said, "Well, now we know who the baby's mother really is," right? So that's a folk tale about Solomon's wisdom. I don't know if that really happened or not, probably not, but it's certainly a folk tale about how wise Solomon was. His wisdom certainly didn't extend toward compassion for his own people. I don't know.
Another thing too, Queen of
The Queen of Sheba? Yes. That's a good comment. I've got to give you the mic.
When I was in the Army, one of my duty stations was Asmara, Ethiopia, which is now Asmara, Eritrea. And at the time it was led by Haile Selassie, king of Ethiopia. And he was, one of his titles was Lion of Judah, that was traced through Queen of Sheba back to Solomon. So,
good comment. Yeah, it is interesting how reputations develop from folk tales, isn't it? Yeah. All right, anything else before? Now we're going to move on to the prophets, Jeremiah and Isaiah. Jeremiah is trying to get the people to come out of their numbness. There was a comment that Pastor Allison made this morning about pain that awakens people in her sermon. That's what Jeremiah was trying to do, is to get people to wake up to what was going on. But let's look at the timeline now. Now we're moving along into the future. You remember, now Solomon's over here on the left-hand side, right? Because we're moving into the future, right? So you can see I mentioned Israel being overrun by the Assyrian Empire. That happens here now. The symbols that are scrolls with numbers on them here are prophets. Number one is Amos, the first literary prophet. We call prophets that have books named after them literary prophets. So Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah, so forth. They're literary prophets. Then there are non-literary prophets who don't have books in the Bible. We read about them in other books. For instance, Elijah and Elisha, we read about in 1st and 2nd Kings. They're non-literary prophets. So we have Amos and Hosea, 1 and 2. 3 is 1st Isaiah. The book of Isaiah was written by three different people, spread apart in time. So we sometimes call them 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Isaiah. 1st Isaiah is chapters 1 through 39. 2nd Isaiah, chapters 40 through 55. 3rd Isaiah, chapters 56 through 66. So this is 1st Isaiah. 4 is Micah. See, they lived at the same time. They were contemporaries. And in fact, they knew of each other. Over here, we're going to talk about Jeremiah. He's number 8. Number 9 is Ezekiel. There are 2 more number 3s. You know, I've said 3 people wrote Isaiah. Here's 1st Isaiah, 2nd Isaiah, 3rd Isaiah. So we're going to be, I'll mention also Amos, but here's 1st Isaiah, 2nd Isaiah. We'll be talking about Jeremiah. Jeremiah, see, was doing his writing immediately before the Babylonian exile, which is this pink and black crosshatch area here, this 50-year period when Judah was in exile in Babylon. And then 2nd Isaiah wrote as the Jews were coming out of the Babylonian exile. 2nd Isaiah his primary concern was getting people to return. King Cyrus of Persia defeated the Babylonians in 539 BCE. A year later, 538 BC, Cyrus issued an edict allowing the Jews to go free and return to their homeland if they wanted to, not a demand, if they wanted to. 2nd Isaiah pleaded with the people to go back and rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. So that's the story. We're going to be talking about Jeremiah anticipating the Babylonians overrunning the country and pleading with the people to come out of their numbness and understand what's going on. And after the Babylonian exile, 2nd Isaiah pleading with the people to go back and rebuild for a new future. First, Jeremiah, it sounds like gloom and doom, but he's trying to use pain and grief to shake people out of their numbness. Look what is happening to you. You don't see it, but look what's happening. He's addressing the people who do not want to ignore what's coming. The denying king, indifferent affluence, cynical oppression, presumptive religion were about to come to an end. The grief of Jeremiah was at two levels. He grieved for the end of his people, and he grieved because no one would listen. It was so obvious to him, but to nobody else. That's why he was a prophet. His grief is expressed as a public, visible event, the actual invasion and slaughter of his people. He could see it coming. My anguish, I writhe in pain. Oh, the walls of my heart is beating wildly. I cannot keep silent, for I hear the sound of the trumpet, the alarm of war. Disaster overtakes disaster. The whole land is laid waste. Suddenly my tents are destroyed, my curtains in a moment. Jeremiah 4:19-20. He casts his grief as a cosmic image at the end of creation. I looked on the earth, and it was complete chaos, and to the heavens, and they had no light. I looked on the mountains, and they were quaking, and all the hills moved to and fro. I looked, and there was no one at all, and all the birds of the air had fled. I looked, and the fruitful land was a desert, and all its cities were laid in ruins before the Lord, before his fierce anger. The people are so numb they can't see the coming of their end. Even the stork in the heavens knows its times, and the turtle dove, swallow, and crane observe the time of their coming. But my people don't know the ordinance of the Lord. There's no understanding of this grief and not enough tears. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of the daughter of my people not been restored? Oh, that my head were a spring of water and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. Oh, that I had in the desert a traveler's lodging place, that I might leave my people and go away from them. Now, it's not like Jeremiah doesn't have any sympathy even for the royal people. He yearns for peace as much as they do, and business as usual would be great, but the time is growing short. We look for peace but find no good, for a time of healing, but there is terror instead. My joy is gone, grief is upon me, my heart is sick. The prophet calls for public grief in the matter of Amos. Amos writes, in all the squares there shall be wailing, and in all the streets they shall say, alas, alas. They shall call the farmers to mourning, and those skilled in lamentation to wailing. In those days you could hire professional mourners for funerals. That's what he means by those skilled in lamentation. In addition, Amos presented a forsaken Israel. Fallen no more to rise is maiden Israel, forsaken on her land with no one to raise her up. Jeremiah picks up on the image of a dying one, not a dying Israel, presented by Amos, but he makes it more radical. The woman is no longer a maiden, but a prostitute. And you, O desolate one, what do you mean that you dress in crimson and that you deck yourself with ornaments of gold, that you enlarge your eyes with paint? In vain you beautify yourself. Your lovers despise you. For I heard a cry as a woman in labor, anguish as of one bringing forth her first child, the cry of daughter Zion gasping for breath, stretching out her hands. Woe is me, I am fainting before killers. Jeremiah even envisions the mother of Israel, Rachel, grieving. Rachel was a wife of Jacob. Jacob was literally Israel. Jacob wrestled at one point in the wilderness, wrestled with a divine being, and was given the alternate name Israel, which means strives with God. So the children of Jacob were literally the children of Israel. Leah and Rachel were his two wives. So Rachel was one of the mothers of the children of Israel. A voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more. This poetry is among the boldest in ancient Israel, bringing back Mother Rachel to grieve her children. Not exiled, not punished, just not. There can only be grief because, to quote Jeremiah, your hurt is incurable, your wound is grievous. There is no one to uphold your cause, no medicine for your wound, no healing for you. Jeremiah's words fall on deaf ears. Babylonia takes control of Judah. In response to a revolt in 597 BCE, the Babylonians deport thousands to Babylon. Another revolt in 587 BCE results in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, and that is it for Judah for the time being. Until King Cyrus of Persia, 50 years later, defeats Babylonia and issues the edict a year later in 538 BCE and allows the Jews to go free. Any questions about Jeremiah's plea for the numb to awaken? Now Isaiah, second Isaiah, after the Jews are free to go, Isaiah's plea for them to act on this, to face their new and glorious future, according to Isaiah. Penetrating despair. This is the second half of what a prophet does, the offering of symbols. Mind the memory of the people, don't make up symbols. That's not the way to go, according to Bergman. Mind symbols, from the memory of the people. A couple of weeks ago, well, a month ago, I guess, it was over a month ago, my immediate family got together for a little family reunion at the beach, and my daughter and I were commiserating over the cost of coffee. She and I both like coffee, and my coffee of choice is a whole bean coffee from a company called Pete's. And I used to be able to get, 3 months ago, I could get a 10-ounce bag of Pete's coffee beans for $6.99. Today it's $11.99 because of a 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee. So we were talking about that, and Laura said, well, there's always the Boston Tea Party. See, all she had to do was say Boston Tea Party. That's a symbol from American history, right? Everybody who knows American history knows the symbol of the Boston Tea Party. That's what I'm getting at here, is don't make symbols up. Take a symbol from the history of our people. That's what I'm getting at here. Mine the memory of the people. And recognize how language shapes consciousness and defines reality. If you're going to be a prophet, learn to do those things. Next thing is hope and yearning. Bring to public expression those hopes and yearnings that have been denied and suppressed. The tyrant denies and suppresses those hopes and yearnings. Bring those alive again. And bring the newness that redefines people. Speak metaphorically about hope, those hopes and symbols. Use those symbols. That's the metaphor part of it, but speak concretely about the newness that redefines our situation. More about that in a second. What is the future that lies ahead? Be specific about that. People are always asking politicians, well, now be specific about our future. That's a good idea. The language of amazement. Comfort, O comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that she has served her term, that her penalty is paid. This is the very first two verses of Isaiah 40, of 2nd Isaiah. The discomforted are comforted. This is not a word in a vacuum or some general theory. The prophet poet writes precisely and concretely. The poet employs a radical political announcement. Get you up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift it up, do not fear. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your God. See, the Lord God comes with might. Your God is back. The people were afraid when they were taken away to Babylon. Babylon had entirely different gods. The people were questioning, is our God around anymore? Where did our God go? Well, Isaiah said, here is your God. Your God comes with might. Jeremiah tried to penetrate numbness and had left Israel in grief. Isaiah had to deal with despair and brings Israel to an enthronement ceremony. God is back on God's throne. He gives a second enthronement ceremony. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces peace, who brings good news and announces salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. Once again, the one who seemed to have lost charge is in charge now. The inversion to real power happens only by suffering. Rejoicing belongs to those who know about abandonment. It's a curious route to kingship, but that's how it comes in Israel's history. I'll talk a little bit more about that next week when we get into examining the pathos and amazement of the story of Jesus, the servant king, the suffering, and the kingdom of Jesus. The first step out of exile, you remember 2nd Isaiah is trying to get the people to come out of exile to a new future. The first step out of exile is to embrace a faithful God. Isaiah contrasts two kinds of gods here. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops. Their idols are beasts and cattle. These things you carry are loaded as burdens on weary animals. The gods of Babylon are objects that must be carried around. They're things. They're carved statues. Do you really need more dead weight? He's saying to people. These are things you've got to carry. They're hard to deal with. Contrast with God who needs no one to carry him. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, all the remnant of the house of Israel, who have been born by me from your birth, carried from the womb. I have made, I will bear, I will carry, and will save. In fact, we are the ones who are carried by God. This is a completely different God than the gods of Babylon. The ridicule of Babylonian gods is followed by the ridicule of Madam Babylon. Come down and sit in the dust, virgin daughter Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, daughter Chaldea. The Chaldean mountains is where Babylon is located. For you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Remove your veil, strip off your robe, uncover your legs, pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, and your shame shall be seen. The poet speaks in metaphor to those who had no future. Shout for joy, O barren one who has borne no children. The metaphor here is those who are barren have no children and therefore no future. But now shout for joy, burst into song and shout, you who have not been in labor. For the children of the desolate woman will be more than the children of the one who is married, says the Lord. God's promise for a new future will surely be kept, because look at the barren women of the Bible. Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Hannah, and Elizabeth in the New Testament, barren women who God promised would have children, and they did. The next image of 2nd Isaiah is one of nourishment. Here, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings for that which does not satisfy? In other words, if you eat the bread of Babylon for long, you will spiritually starve. Don't stay there. Come out. Come and eat the bread that feeds the soul. The poet reminds the people of God's promise to David. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. Next, a call to trust in the new future. Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? Finally, the prophet speaks to the fatigue among us. Of course, this is going to be a lot of work. It's tiring. First, about God, he does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. And then the promise to all of us exiles. Even youths will faint and be weary, and the young will fall exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. The newness from God is the only serious source of energy. Any questions? That's all I have for today. Yes, yes, Jeremiah wrote some of the most beautiful poetry in the Bible. The weeping prophet? Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah. Okay, next week I'm going to be talking about pathos and amazement of Jesus, the pathos of suffering and death and the amazement of resurrection and ascension. Jesus, of course, was much more than a prophet, but he indeed was a prophet. Yeah.
The Wailing Wall.
The Wailing Wall, yes. Yes. Oh, that's a question I don't know. The question is, was that from the first temple or the second temple? I don't know. Let me look that up. Okay. Go in peace, serve the Lord.